All right, good. Okay. All right. So a lot of what we've been doing, what we've been doing, it's like back when we think about this process of these four stages of thought, thinking, idea, and concept, right? When we think about that, that's how ideas evolve, right? And what we want to do is that we want to be able to catch ourselves at different stages of our thinking process and ask ourselves, is this desire the desire to share, or is this the desire to receive? And so I use eating as an example, right? So a person goes and they say, they have just thought of eating. Well, they could ask themselves and say, hey, you know what? Where is this thought of eating coming from? Am I actually hungry right now? Right? Am I actually hungry right now? Or, or, or am I, or do I feel scared? Right? Like I'm not hungry right now. I just ate a little while ago. So why do I want to eat again? Because I'm feeling something, right? And so then I can ask myself, well, am I eating for the sake of desire to share? Desire to share would be for to be healthy, to have strength, to have enough strength to serve Hashem, live a life, right? But if I'm eating because I'm scared, that has to do with me receiving for myself, right? And so we want to be able to go through any aspect of our life and say, well, why am I doing it? If I buy, like, say, if I'm buying, a person wants to go and they want to go and buy a new pair of shoes, right? But they already have a pair of shoes. The shoes are fine, right? And if they didn't have any money to buy new shoes, they wouldn't even be thinking about buying new shoes because the shoes they have are fine. So why do they want the shoes? Is the shoes there because I want to feel better about myself? Is the shoes there because I feel like I'm missing something right now? So if I add something, a lot of people do this, what they call shopping therapy, right? But the reality is that they're feeling a lack, right? And that's what we want to be able to say. Is my thought coming from a sharing, or is it coming from a place of lack, right? The things that we like, why do we want to do it? Why do we want that, right? And so we want to go into that. So now what we want to do is we want to even expand that this system even further. And we want to cut the thinking process into two aspects. One aspect, which is systematic, right? Systematic, meaning an exact system. And the other part of the thinking process is imaginative, right? And so you have the imaginative part of the brain and you have the systematic part of the brain, right? And that would be the left brain, right? Which is in the frame of left brain would be in the frame of or start with the right brain. The right brain is the imaginative part of the brain. Right comes from the place of hesed, right? Comes from the place of sharing. The left part of the brain comes from the place of restriction, limitation. So one aspect of the thinking is imaginative, and the other part of the thinking is systematic. And so this is a very important thing to understand because one of the gifts of Torah, of learning Torah, is that you really have to learn how you learn. Because everybody has a unique way of learning and understanding information and this. And sometimes, people get discouraged because like some guys, you see them in yeshiva, right? Like guys who are more like very creative guys, learning Gemara is not so easy for them. You know what I mean? They're really holy guys, but the way their brain works is not as systematic. They're more imaginative, right? And so another part of a tradition of learning is through storytelling, right? And storytelling is a way to share very, very deep ideas and powerful ideas and power analytical programs of how to analyze society, life, or scenarios, but in a way that that part of the brain, that right side of the brain, that imaginative part of the brain, that part of Hesed can flow with it, right? and know that you're working that part of the brain. When you're going into the laws, the systematic processes, that's the left part of the brain, right? But within the Torah, you connect to both sides, right? You connect to the systematic part, the structure, and you connect to the imaginative. So anyway, so I want to introduce, if you guys haven't learned Rabbi Nachman stories before, Rabbi Nachman is his stories are very popular, but it's so many stories, and it was very popular in European Jewry. These ideas of stories, like that. But I mean, obviously, you could trace stories in all cultures. All cultures have used stories. The framework of these stories and other stories from other parts of the world. We're just talking about from the frame of the Torah and that outlook, right? So the stories are given to bring people closer to that idea. And what's interesting, you always hear like the Hebrew Israelites, they'd be like, "Get out of here with that Yiddish." A lot of these stories were originally written in Yiddish. So we're reading some Yiddish transcript, whatever. But the point is the same: is that stories is a mechanism, especially for children, right, and younger people, right, who have that imaginative part of their brain is very strong, right. And so I like to look at the stories and say, you don't have to necessarily use these stories, but the idea of using stories, which you guys probably already do, but people, it's something that needs to be discussed, right? But using stories as a very powerful mechanism for teaching and teaching good ideas. So we're seeing one of the masters write stories, which is Rabbi Nachman. We learned his other stuff, so why not learn his other? And then we'll find other stories. The stories are always good to say over Shabbat and these different things. Okay, so this story particularly, I've never learned it before, but I met a guy who lives up north in Israel, and we when we were at his house, he had this book here, and his book was of this story, right? So the story may be kind of long. So I don't know how long we're gonna. I don't know if we're gonna complete the whole story because I have no idea how long it is, right? Because some of these stories are like long, right? But each section is going to teach us something that is unique. Like the way you're going to learn it is going to be different than the way your wife learns it, and the way you learn it is the way I'm different than I because we're all different. So we're going to see and hear different things in the story, and that's the beauty of Rabbi Nachman's stories because they're written in such this like very way that we can all connect to different things. It's going to connect to the same thing. So anyway, so I was at this guy's house and he was there. It's a guy that I know. He married a girl, and they live up north, right? And so we were there. Me and Sapura were over there, and we had Shabbos by them, and so he had this book there, which was this book, The Seven Beggars. And I was like, "What is that?" He said, "Oh man, it's so deep. It's so deep." He said, "This is." He said, "This story is why I became religious." And I just remember seeing that, thinking like, "Man, maybe I should get that book too." There might be some powerful stuff in there, right? Because the guy, he's a pretty spiritual guy. So I never read it, and I was, looking for different things, and then I came upon it, and I was like, wow, what a great thing. So we could incorporate this into our learning models, which is stories and these structures, and to give our brain a little bit of a rest because we're doing some very technical Torahs, right? We're dealing with levels of worlds, levels of souls, levels of tetragrammaton. We got the levels of the spherotes. We got different levels of desires, and they're all functioning at the same time. And we're trying to put that all in our head. Okay, so we don't have to go crazy, right? We could go a little bit slow, and and bring in the right brain imaginative stuff. So I'm gonna be learning with this for you, but this Rabbi Nachman, one of the greatest of all time, leader of the Breslov movement, thousands of followers around the world. And it's different branches of Torah. You know what I mean? There's always Breslov, there's Chabad, there's the Litvish, and that's why I love it because there's so many perspectives and they're all so deep. Okay, so the stories of seven beggars. So it says Asper lachem ech havu shemi kin maaseh pa'am echat haya melech vehaya lo ben yakid. Okay, so it says like this. So this is the introduction of the story. I guess the introduction is very short. The introduction is, I'll tell you about being happy. Okay, that's what he starts us with. Rabbi Nachman, he told us, whatever it takes to get happy, even if we have to do something out of the box, but he used the word crazy a few times. Anyways, okay. Okay, this is the tale. Okay, a tale. There was a king. There was a king who had had an only son. The king wanted to transfer the kingdom to his son during his lifetime. So he threw a grand party, which is called a ball. And now, when the king throws a ball, there is certainly a great materium. So, especially now that he was transferring the kingdom to his son during his lifetime. It's like LeBron in the sun, no? It says there was certainly a great celebration, and there at the ball were all the royal officers and all the dukes and gentries and all the people who were very merry at the ball, and the king too enjoyed this. And the king transferred his kingdom to a son in his lifetime, for it was a honorific event for the king. So a very great celebration took place there, where all types of festivals were there, song groups, drama groups, and so forth were there, and everything was useful just and for a materium, like a marriage, and it was all there at the ball. Okay, so this king wants to transfer his power to things. So number one, you could read it a lot of different ways, right? King, we always know is Hashem. Son, we know B'nai Israel, right? Kind of like this type of a thing, right? Maybe not. Well, I mean, we can see it a lot of ways. Okay, so he says like this: "V'kimane asu shemekima meod imad malak ve'amru lebinod hayot she'in chose bekokivin." He says, and when they have waxed very merry, and the king, well, okay, he says, when they have waxed very merry, I'm not sure what that means. The king got up and said to his son, being that I am a stargazer, I see that you will at some time fall from the kingship, and therefore see to it that you do not have sadness and that there's no grief. And when you fall from rain, just be happy. So his dad comes to him and says, "Yeah, it's starting to sound like Israel a little bit now." So the dad comes to him. I've gave you dominion over the world, and I see in the future that you're going to fall from kingship, right? He said, but do not despair. He says, he says, and do not despair. He says, be happy, and if you will be happy, I will also be happy. And if you have sadness, I will still be happy that you are not king, since you are not fit to be a king, if you cannot keep yourself happy. In other words, if you are the king of man, you cannot keep yourself happy, even when you fall from rain, when you aren't fit to be any sort of king. When you will be happy, I will be extraordinary happy. Ve'kabel haben melech et ha amluka beyad Rama. He said the king's son took over the regime very sharply and appointed his own royal officers, and he added dukes, gentries, and soldiers. And now the son of the king was a very clever son, and loved wisdom very much, and very great and intellectual accompanied him. And whoever came with him with some sort of wisdom was esteemed by him, and he would grant them honor and riches, and for their wisdom, whatever each one wanted, he gave him. One wanted money, he gave him money. The other wanted honor, he gave him honor. Anything for wisdom, and because studying was so important to him, they all took a wisdom, and the entire country and was occupied with philosophy, with wisdom. And he says, because this one desired money. In order to get money for it became his motive. And that one desired status, and one desired honor. All because of them, they were so busy only with philosophy. Therefore, they forgot they're in that the country that they forgot they're in that country that strategizes of war in order in other words how to wage war. For they were all they were busy exclusively with philosophy to such a degree that the smallest person in the country was the greatest sage in another country, while their wise men were utterly wild scholars on account of their philosophies. Those wise men of the country fell to heresy, and they drew the son of the king into their heresy. And abide the simple folks were not harmed and did not become disbelievers, and they were as great depth the subtly in the sage's wisdom, so common folk were not able to enter into their wisdom. If therefore they did not harm them, only the wise men and the kings of the sun became heretics. So you see this. What's the story about? It sounds like he's talking about the Jewish people, and he's talking about our decline and how we were anointed by the king and how we were given this responsibility, and we loved it. We were just so smart, and we wanted to learn so much that we got seduced by wisdom, and eventually by heresy. Ve'haben meleg machmat shehaya bo tov ki golad. He says, and the king's son, because there was good in him, for he was born with goodness and good character traits. He would frequently remind himself, "Where am I in the world? What am I doing?" And would it make a big groan and a deep sigh over it? He would ponder, "What is this? I should be carried away with such things. What's going on with me? Where am I in this world?" He says, as he kept sighing intensely, but as soon as he became the to use his intellect and his heretical philosophy became strong in him, became strong again in him. This happened numerous times, and he would still contemplate where is he in the world, but what was he doing? And as above with the grooming and the sighing, but as soon as he began using his intellect and his heretical beliefs, the strong belief came over again. So he's going back and forth. He's like, am I connected to the goodness, the framework, this? Because I have good character traits. I learned these from my ancestors. But I have these new thoughts and these new ideas. So what's happening to me? You see how this story's written? This is like unreal, right? Now I see why the guy I was telling that told me this said this is how he became religious. Because he's looking at the process. He says, "Ve'yahi hayom ve'haya barita ha'eze medina uverachu kulam udarech bari'achatam." Okay, so he says like this: the Exodus, the boy and the girl get lost, and the and the beggars come and feed them. Okay, what does this mean? We don't know. So he says, the day came to pass where was a flight in a certain country. Okay, there was a fight. It says flight in a certain country. Everyone fled, and as they were fleeing, they went through a forest, losing two children there, a male and a female. Someone lost a male, and someone lost a female. Right. So I guess this is another scene. Right. We got to move our brains to another scene. So he said, and they were all still there, children of 4 or 5 years, and they did not have anything to eat. And they screamed and they cried because they had nothing to eat. Meanwhile, they came to them a beggar, going along with his snacks, which are called tirubs, carrying bread in them. And these children started to nudge him and huddle after him. He gave them bread and they ate. And he asked them, Where have you come here from? And they answered, we don't know. For the little children, and he started going away. And he started to go away from them. And they asked him to take them with him. And he said to them, this I do not want that you should go with me. Meanwhile, they should take a look, and the beggar is blind. It was it was a marvel for them. Since he is blind, how did he know how to go? The truth is, this itself is a novelty that such a question should occur to them, for they were still young children. However, they were still clever children. Therefore, it was a wonder to them. He blessed them, the blind beggar. You should be as I am. You should be as old as I. And he left them more bread and went away. The children understood that Hashem was watching over them and had sent him there as the blind beggar to give him food. Akare ka kala. So who are these children that are lost in the forest, and they don't even know how they got there, right? And they're begging and they're hungry. So it says Acher ka kala asma kala kem veshuv hitkilu. So he says, and afterwards their bread ran out, and again they started to scream for food. And after that, it became night, and they passed, and the night was there in the morning, and they still had nothing to eat. So they screamed and they cried. And meanwhile, again, a beggar came up, and who was deaf, and he started talking to them, and he showed them his hands, and he said to them, "I don't hear anything whatsoever." And this beggar also gave them bread, and he started going away from them, and they also wanted to take him with him, but he did not want. He said, and he blessed him too, and he says that he should be like, and he blessed it too. He says that you should be like I am, and also left them bread and went on his way. Vechazer vechala vechalachem asmam vechazeru vesaaku. So he says, and he says, and later on their bread also ran out, and again they cried out. They screamed to Hashem. Again there came a beggar whose tongue was tied. That is, he was slammered in his mouth. And he began to speak to them, but he was mumbling his words, and they did not know what he was saying. But they did know but they did know what they were saying. But he did know what they were saying, and only they did not know what he was saying, because his mouth was slammering. I don't know, like he couldn't talk. And he says, this beggar also gave him bread and also started to go on his way. And before, he also blessed him that he should be as him as before. Vekazer uva vekasan vehaya vesaro akam. And he says, and again the beggar who came is in again came a beggar who had a crooked neck, and it transpired before as before. And he came, and the beggar was hunchback. Then there came a beggar who was hunchback, and he came, and then there came a beggar without hands, and then there became a beggar without feet. And each one of them gave bread and blessed them, and that they should be like him, and just like all the other beggars. So he says, and afterward the bread ran out, and yet again they started to walk towards a settlement until they came to a way they went with until they went the way with that way until they came to a village. These children went into the house, and they had pity on them and gave them bread, and they continued until the house, and to there they gave them bread too, so that they kept going around into the houses. They kept going around into the houses. Sorry, I lost my place. Or they started going on to the houses, and then they saw things good for them, and they all were given bread. And the children decided between them that they should always be together, and they made themselves a large sack, which are called trooms, and went around houses, and they went to all the happy occasions, and like the bris milim, like the circumcisions, and to weddings, and they continue further along until and going into the cities and the houses, and they went to markets, fairs, and they would sit among the beggars in the same way that they're on a bank of the earth or with a teller, a plate collecting alms until the children became famous already among all the beggars. And for they all recognized them and they all knew them. And they all were children who had been lost in the forest as mentioned. Pa'ayim echad haya yirda gadol be'azei ir gadola ve'chaluch La Shama Lekativinim Ve'alu Be'ahabanim Kalachud Gam Kin Lesher Uve. So he's going to back. So the thing is, he's going through these different aspects. You see how the story is progressing, right? And the idea that we're going into is this idea of being able to say, like, what does the story mean? What is the story? What is the sage trying to teach us? What does the beggar mean? What does the different beggar mean? What does it mean the children who are in the forest crying out for bread, and God bringing them bread and bringing them bread through these different characters, and all these characters have some type of a deficiency, right? And so he says like this. He says the beggars march and the boys. Okay, so he says at the time there was a big fair, and all the beggars went there as well as the children too. And it came to mind of the beggars that they all should match children and they should marry each other. And as soon as they started discussing it pleased all of them and they were matched. But how could they make them a wedding and such? So now there's this idea that all the beggar children, I guess, are old enough now they can get married. And he says, and they came to a decision as much as such as beggar. Okay, so he says, how could they make order? They came to a decision as much on such and such the day of the king would have his birthday feast. And he says, and all the beggars would go there, and from what they have requested for themselves there, meat and bread, they would make a wedding. And so it was. The beggars went to this minyanim, I guess we call it. I don't know what I'm saying. And he says, and requested out for themselves bread and meat, and also collected what was left over from the banquet, the meat. So I guess these kids were just like these beggar people, and they just kind of like just went moving. And they said, "How can we make a wedding?" This, so I guess they went around and they started collecting it, and this was called the big loaves of a special occasion. And they went ahead and dug out a big trench, which could contain 100 people and cover it with sticks, earth, and trash. And they all went aside and married the children there, setting up a chuppah for them. And they're very, very happy there. And the groom and the brides were also extremely happy. And now the grooms and the brides start recalling the kindness of God had done for them. And when they were in the forest and started crying and greatly yearned, and how can the first beggar, the blind one, be brought here, and who brought us bread in the forest, right? All right, great. All right, great. Right. So, anyways, okay, so he's saying this. So they get married and this whole thing. Where's the story going? We're gonna see. He says veta kef miyad betoka shehavu. So he says on the first day, he says, just as they were longing very much for the blind beggars to be immediately called out and saying, I'm here. I have come for your wedding. I'm presenting you with a commonly meaning gift given to the groom in reward for his chuppah, for getting married. A drasha, a lecture, but possible meaning a gift from the free for seeking the drasha. Okay, so he's saying he's bringing them a gift. The blind man says he's bringing them a gift. What does the gift mean? It's a mock locus around it. So he says that it should be. He said it should be old as I. So this is the blessing is for previously I have blessed with this, and that is it should be as old as I'm, and now I present it to you as a complete free gift. that you should live as long as I. I think that I am blind. I am not blind at all, except all the time of the whole world does not come across me as much as a as an eye blind. Thus he appears blind, but he doesn't peek into the world whatsoever, for the entire world time does not come across him whatsoever. Even as a blind as an eye blinks, therefore no sight or no glimpse of the world at all is relevant to him. So I guess he's blind in this unique way. And he's blind where he's detached from reality in a certain way, where he's able to function. He's able to function, and he's detached. And he says, "I have not." He said, "I have not begun living at all, for I am blind." And he says, "And it is not alone that I say this. On contrary, I have approval of it from a great ego. I will tell you the story. Although, okay, all right. So, okay, so the story just keeps going, right? So, and we're gonna do a little bit of we're gonna do some halakha too. So don't do it, but we're working through the story. So now where we're at in the story is that this old man comes to him who's blind, one of the beggars, right? The first beggar was blind, right? So he comes to him with a gift, right? And he says, he blessed him. He says, "For I had blessed you with this, that you should be old as I. Now I'm presenting you a complete free gift that you should live as long as I. I think that you think that I am blind, right? But this is what he says to him: I am not blind at all, except the time of the whole world does not come across to me as a blink of an eye." He says, "Thus he appears blind, but he doesn't peek into the world whatsoever, for the entire world time does not come across to him whatsoever." So he's completely absent of time, as even as a blind eye. Therefore, no sight or any glimpse of the world is relevant to him. Okay, so this guy that they saw in the desert, in the forest, that came to them that was blind. It's not that he was blind, but the time system of the world does not occur to him. He's completely separate from him, right? And he says because of that, he hasn't even really started to live yet. So maybe we can understand the person who's coming to the children, who's giving bread and being blind, is saying that he's suffering from this aspect of not being able to recognize the system. Like we're saying today is Tu B'Shvat, right? So what's the significance of Tu B'Shvat? So number one, there's 4 New Years throughout the year, right? And the first New Year you start with, you say in the month of Nisan, right? Rosh Chodesh Nisan is 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 um is a new year, right? And it's the year of the time where the kings of the world are counted, right? And the kings of the world are counted, meaning like so like say for example a person becomes like a the head like a chief or whatnot, right, of a tribe or a community. And they say, well, how long has he been chief? Well, you would if he became chief, like say last November, we on April that would count as 1 year. You see what I'm saying? So we count from that standpoint, right? And 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 that's what it is, right? And it's a whole system. So that's the first New Year's, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, right? And then you have the second New Year, and right, and we're talking about energy shifts, right? Because and we'll go into that in a second, but the point is just to say that when we talk about Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that's the first New Year. The second New Year that we have is in the month of Elul, right? In the month of Elul is a counting of animals, right? Like there's like every year you dedicate certain animals to the base of Mikdash, to the priest and the whole thing, right? And so you do that, You do that, and so you do that a certain amount of time. You do that every year, right? Certain amount. It's like it's out of 10. It's a whole thing, right? Every 10th animal you dedicate to. So that's Rosh Chodesh Elul. But again, animal, we understand what animal means, right? We understand these things. So you have that, right? And then you have Rosh Hashanah, right? And Rosh Hashanah is also a new year, right? It's a new year of the human being. It's a new year. It's when Adam was created on 6 days of creation. And man is created anew. And man has this whole process between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur where we remove all of our sins and we give him new life, right? What nation can say that? We have a day where all the sins are removed. Okay. Then we have the fourth, which is what we are at today, Tu B'Shvat, right? Now, there was a tradition that you see a lot of people do, which is a tradition around like eating fruits and the new fruits and New Year's. Okay, very nice. And it is the New Year of the trees. But what does that mean, right? What does that mean? Especially when we have things like Shavuot, where it's very much connected to the produce that comes from trees, right? So what's going on here? The New Year's of the tree, right? So it's like this. A few months ago, we go into this process in the month of Cheshvan. Cheshvan is the month after Tishri, where we have all the holidays. And when we transfer from the holidays into Tishri into Cheshvan, that what happens is that this process starts the time shifting. And what happens? The sun starts to travel further and further away from the earth, and the days get shorter, and it gets colder, and things stop to grow, and it goes into a time of concealment. And so the way that our sages deal with this time of concealment, at the apex of this concealment, we have this holiday called Hanukkah. And so Hanukkah is commemorating for sure, the fight of the Maccabees and all the challenges that we had with the Hellenized Jews and all these types of people. But even bigger than that, the lighting of that time of darkness, right? That time of darkness that you could see inside of the Torah, that time of darkness is that time of darkness is that time of darkness is expressed inside of the Torah. These are the times of the parshas like Miketz, the time the time where there was a lot of concealment in Yosef's life, right? His family turned against him. He was by himself. But this is the parsha, and this is also what's going on in the solar system. And the solar system is only a response to what's going on in the heavens. So when we're looking at the world around us, we're looking at the Torah. So we go through this process of darkness, which is the apex of the darkness, is Hanukkah, right? And even by the non-Jews, this is that time of the year is where people get depressed. They start, God forbid, taking their lives because the darkness, the choshek is so strong during that time, the concealment. So we continue to move forward out of that after Hanukkah, and slowly the sun becomes closer and closer. And now we get to this process of Shvat. And what happens in Shvat? The 15th of Shvat is the time where the sun is becoming closer and closer, and the awakening of the soil is starting to happen from below. What we thought was concealed is now growing itself, and now the sap in the trees start to show. And so this showing that this time of new life and new beginning is happening, right? It's happening. This new beginning, this new life is happening right now and is being expressed by the trees. And to just give a segue, during this time is when people really start preparing for Purim, right? They start reading the Masechta Megillah. Maybe we do it. I mean, we're doing so much learning, but we got to start learning it. And so the point is just saying that um, during this time is a time of concealment. And so now we're breaking out of that concealment. And so now we moving forward. And what are we getting ready for? Purim. So what's going on Purim? It's a battle between Haman and Mordecai. Haman and Mordecai. What is the point? And so what's the whole connection of Purim? That we should reach a level of elevation that we don't know the difference between Haman and Mordecai. Haman represents, or Haman represents the desire to receive. Mordecai represents the desire to share. That's battling during a time of concealment. But we can see as we transform out of the concealment, we go into the light. And the light is the month of Nisan, right? Because the month of Adar, right, is a time of Purim. We read the Megillah, we see there's a time where you don't even, the whole Megillah is what? Reading a story that Hashem's name's not even mentioned. Why? Because the point of Purim is to reach the level where you see Hashem in all things. That's why we want to not know the difference between Haman and Mordecai, because we've reached a level where no, everything is from Hashem. We don't live in the world of the Itzadas. You have the Itzachayim, the tree of life, and the Itzadas, the tree of knowledge. The Etzachayim is showing, it goes up and it says, hey, you know what? Everything's from Hashem. The Etzadah says, there's good things and there's bad things. And so the time of Purim is such a connection that you reach the level of Etzachayim, which is the understanding that all things, even Haman was serving the Jews. He was trying to kill us. He says he's going to do this. He's going to destroy us. No, he was serving. He was serving. He was honoring Hashem. And then we look at our lives, and we look at so many people that came into our lives, we could say, hey, you know what? A lot of these people were protecting us, even though it seemed like they weren't helping us. They were actually helping us. Okay. So anyway, so we're back into this beggar, right? And this beggar, the beggar, is explaining to him that I am oblivious to the world that you are, right? And listen, this is the key point. He says, even in a blink of eye, he says, therefore, no sight or glimpse of the world at all is relevant to him. He said, because I'm very old, and yet I'm very entirely young, infantile. And he says, I have not yet begun to live at all. So you remember we were learning Rabbi Ashlag? And Rabbi Ashlag teaches us that soul at the point of 13 is in a place of desire to receive. And then there's an inner quality of the soul that expresses itself, but it can only express itself with Torah and mitzvot, right? And we see people all the time, like people, like grown men. They have not grown past that adolescent stage. They have not grown into wisdom. They're still kids. So he's saying, even though I'm an old man, I'm still very young and have not yet to begin living at all. But I'm still very old. And it is not I alone that say this. On the contrary, I have an approval upon it from a great eagle. What does he mean, great eagle? I don't know. And I will tell you the story. So now we're going to hear the story of this great eagle. Right? Well, you know what? Let's stop here. Let's talk for a second and let's do some halakha. And we'll talk this out a little bit. But you see where we're going with these stories. Any thoughts, reflections on it?
Well, it's like there's so much information that we can draw from this story about what we're learning. Even when he makes that comment, when the blind beggar makes the comment about that he's really not blind, but rather it's almost like he doesn't have almost a concept of time, like he doesn't see the world like in the blink of an eye. That made me think about a concept that you brought forth many months ago about the 1%. And so from that 1%, it's not even a reality to him. Because if he can't physically see it, so he's not using that 1%. And so it's not even it's not something that he functions in. And so he's using other other aspects of his abilities or capabilities to discern what's going on around him. But at the same time, it also becomes a limitation for him.
Yep.
It's also a limitation for him. And then, you know, and when you go back and you think about the children in the forest, it seems like they're in a consistent, like they want to do what is right, they want to grow, but they're in a consistent state of receiving.
Yep. Your children.
The children.
No, but they are children, right?
Yeah, they are. But I mean, it shows that they become adult.
Yep.
Or they're getting married. They're making. They end up getting encouraged to make an adult step in life, but yet they're still children. You know, even their approach to marriage is childlike in its essence. That hey, we're gonna basically go and get food from the king. The king's this is his birthday, so we're gonna basically bum off the king and utilize that food that was supposed to be for the birthday of the king, and we're going to take that and really misuse it and apply it to our marriage.
Exactly.
You see, it's very interesting.
Yeah. So and that's one of the things, you know, we want to get into. We want to be able to see God in everything. You know what I mean? And we want to be able to see that, like, really God, that even if you're reading a newspaper article or, you know, or a blog or whatever, it's like, you know, well, how is God speaking to me through this? You know, what is the codes that are being mentioned to me, you know, right now? You know what I mean? Like, what's happening, and how do I and how do I connect to it? You know what I mean? Hold on, I'm just looking for 1 second. Hold on. Sorry about that. I was gonna bring there's halakas on trees, and I was gonna bring it, but I didn't realize how short they were. I only got like 5 of them in there. So I'm trying to get another source on it. Hold on. Okay, yeah. So anyway, so the story part is just it's. Hmm. All right, so we'll keep on the same page as we were yesterday. We were yesterday. So yesterday we learned the halakot of honoring one's parents, um, to be able to look at that, and so we're going to continue that idea of honoring elders and Torah scholars and different people, right? Because the idea is to be able to see this idea of honoring as a big part of, you know, our relationship with Hashem, right? Is seeing the brilliance of Hashem through the people in our community. And yeah, whoa, okay, people calling as always, right when we're giving classes, right? All right, okay, so it's like this. So this is a Shulchan Aruch, chapter 444, right? Hold on. Okay, chapter 44. So it says, Chav Adam be kevod rabo, yira atol yitara mi bashel aviv. Okay, so he says, you must honor and fear your teacher, more than your father, because your father only brought you into life in this world, but your Rebbe brings you into life of the world to come. Ketiv mifnei sheva takum ve hadar ta Zakin. So he says, it's written, in the presence of an elder, you shall raise and you shall show respect to an elder. An elder in this context refers to a Torah scholar, as it says, gather me 70 wise men of elders of Israel, and are certainly the situation is called for wisdom, as it is written, whom you know to be the elder of the people and its officer. Therefore, it is positive command to rise before a teacher, scholar who is distinguished in knowledge of Torah, even if he is not advanced in years and he is not your teacher. It is also a mitzvah to rise before an elderly person, even if he is at least 70 years, even if he's an ignoramus. So even if a person is not, like some big Torah scholar, but if they reach 70 years, when they walk in a room, you have to stand for them. And he says, even if he is ignorant person, provided he is not wicked. If he's wicked, he's not in the question. He says, even an elderly person who is not Jewish, you should talk respectfully and give him an helping hand. Shelosha Shehavu Mikhalakin Vaderek. So he says, when three people, one of which is a Rav, is walking together, the Rav should walk in the middle. The other two should fall back slightly and walk at his side, and the elder one should on the right, and the younger one on the left. Avon gadol hu levazot tehi midei chachamim or the lisha no tan. So he says, it's a grave sin to humiliate a Talmid Chacham or to hate him. He says Jerusalem was destroyed until they begin to Jerusalem was not destroyed until they begin to humiliate Talmid Chachamim, Torah scholars. And he says, and as it says, but they mocked the messengers of God and disgraced the words and scoffed at him and his prophets. That is to say, that they humiliated those who teach his word. And also, that is also what the Torah says, if you will despise my status, that is to say, if you despise those who teach my status, and anyone who humiliates a Torah scholar has no portion in the world to come. And he is included among those of whom it is said, and for he has degraded the word of Hashem, it is forbidden to make a sterile use of one who studies Torah laws. He says, Talmid Chachmam Sheish Lo Sekora Lemikor. So if a Torah scholar has merchandise to sell, we should not permit anyone to sell such merchandise until he sells his merchandise. This is true only when there is no Gentile selling such merchandise. But if a Gentile is selling such merchandise, this is not so, because the Torah scholars will not profit from this. It will be needlessly cause loss to other Jews. Me ha shehu. So he's saying, like we want the guys who do the Torah. We want him to make his money. That's what we want, because he dedicates his life to this. He has his little products. He sells them. That's how he eats. He says, but if it's a competitive marketplace, you can't go broke. You got to pay for your kids. You know what I mean? He says, "Min shehu mu chazak le talmid chachmam be dorot." So he says, if to be accepted as a Torah scholar in his generation, one must be competent to discuss and debate topics as the written law and oral law, the Torah, the Torah, and have proper understanding of most of the Talmudic codes of law. The Torah, he says, hold on. Hold on. Okay, hold on, go back. Hold on. Okay, we're back on. Okay, so he says that a Torah study is his main occupation, even if he has a profession or a business with which to support himself. And it provides the needs of his family, not necessarily amass wealth. Whenever he is free from his occupation, he studies Torah. and all requirements applied to him then according to the law. He exempt from all the forms of taxes and levy, even if he is wealthy. And when a personal tax that is incumbent upon each person, the townsmen are obligated to pay for him. However, everything is dependent on the discretion of the elected town leaders. He says, Talmid Chacham Halazeli. So he says, in a scholar who slights the mitzvah and is not God fearing is treated to like the insignificant man of the community. Kohen ve'Yisrael shehem sharim. So he says, and the Kohanim and the Israelites are equal in Torah scholarship. It is a positive scriptural mitzvah to precede the Kohen as is said. You will sanctify him and your rabbis in a blessed memory. Explain that it is refers to all matters of sanctity. That is, in all the matters of importance, he should be sanctified. This he is called first to the Torah reading, and he is the first speaker at the public gatherings, and he speaks first and expounds of the Torah, and he should also speak first in the yeshiva, but also at the meal. He is to say bracha of hamotzi and to lead the bracha mazon, the after blessing. He should be giving choice portions before others who are dining, unless an Israel is present who is greater than him in Torah. So you have the different levels. You have the Kohanim, you have the Levim, and you have Israel. But he's saying like if the Kohanim in Israel at the same level, obviously the Kohanim would do it. Or if the Kohanim the Levi is the Kohanim of force, right? But if the Levi or the Israel is at a high level of Torah, then it switches. So he says, and Israel does not need to give him a better share, and it is not honorable for the Kohen to take better share. For one who covets the better share would never see a sign of blessing. The Kohanim is not present. It is best to give preference to a Levi before an Israel. And all things mentioned here, they are equal. All things mentioned here is if they're equal to Torah scholar. He says, Asur lehish tamesh be kohen afilu bezman hazeh. And he says, it is forbidden to make sterile civil use of a Cohen. This applies that even in our times and in like tracking unwarranted benefit of a scarce object. It is as if you sanctify him, and he's offered you bread of your God. And he's saying, don't overuse the Cohen. Like the Cohen he means something. He says, and even now, even though we have no sacrifice, he retains his sanctity. If the Cohen wants to forego the honor due to him, he may do so for his possessions, and he may forego its honors and pin it to Israel, use it as a servant. Certainly, he may give the Israelite the honor of preceding him for almost okay. So, anyways, that's some stories. That's some halakot on the honor the functioning of the community, the functioning with the rabbis, the functioning with wise elders, and basically saying they get the honors, right? Our elders get the honors. The people who live long lives, even if people are not even like at a high level of scholarship, just the fact that they lived life and they were and they're able to function, at a high level and or even a low level, but the fact that they're still functioning, deserves our respect because the person who lived that long, they've achieved a lot of tikkunim, right? Because we're not doing the work we're supposed to be doing in this lifetime. Hashem's just like, all right, you're out. Anyway, so any ideas, thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, we studying like we studying um, just giving a part of our homeschool class, and just this idea to understand the whole concept of uh, okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, great.
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And so what I was saying, something's going on with my setup here. We were teaching them about halakha, in that we found out that halakha literally means the way that we should go. Okay, so the way that we should go, and that is the main idea about every facet of our lives, and you always hear, and I'm gonna say this about within within Hebrew Israelite communities, what you're gonna always hear is, hold on one second, man, is nation building and community building, right? This whole concept of nation building, community building. And a lot of times the ideas in order to do that are just, are made up. They're like created. They're not really based upon so when we discuss this, it's the same structure of how we're supposed to treat our elders, and also the structure of how we're supposed to treat scholars, and how we're supposed to treat others, and even to the very essence of how we move, and how we honor them in every expression that we have. How we handle those that
Thank you.
Okay, could you hear me? Okay. Yeah, that's it. So this gives us that structure in that area of nation building, because it's everything that we do. We can't separate ourselves from it. And so to understand how to treat our elders, how to treat our teachers, how to treat the rabbis, how to treat the scholars, is highly in order to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's so much, right? It's so much information. There's so much structuring, but they're crucial. These things that we're talking about are crucial, and they're foundational, and it's building the home, right? And it's building the home in a spiritual component, right? And it creates, when you talk about honoring the elders, it creates an accountability for the elder, right? When a young person is honoring their elder, that makes the elder in the community be like, well, where am I coming from? Am I giving wisdom? Am I helping them out? Am I showing things? So it creates a full accountability on the child to see their elders in this way, and for the elder to see themselves that they have a sense of responsibility in the community, right? You have to we have to help our next generation, and it's not just through basketball, right? It's not just through sports. It's not just through business mentorship. It's not just through the thing. It's saying no. We need to empower guys that are having children. You know, they're having children at young age. You know, we need people in there saying, "Hey, got to get married, start a family." You know, it's even an economic you know, it's an economic thing. You know what I'm saying? So even though, you know, I know with welfare and these things they're trying to make it difficult, but it's just saying we have to think about imagine, you know, what it's like to rebuild the black family, right? In the American family, right? The Western family, right? And maybe not just from the standpoint of, you know, what it means to rebuild it, but to create a spiritual one. We've never had a spiritual outlook on the family in the West, right? And so that goes for all backgrounds. You know, just because there are other people with different complexions that had, you know, certain economic success, you know, nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that spiritually they have not had very much success. You know, we're dealing with our community, but we have to be an example for all the nations, right? So, anyways, we'll continue on tomorrow. Um, we'll keep pushing it tomorrow. OTNL should probably join us tomorrow. But you know, we just got to keep pushing it. You know, we just got to keep pushing it and opening new gates, new awareness, new building blocks, and just thinking big. You know, what type of impact can we make? How big of an impact can we make? Because everything is from Hashem. Anyways, Baruch atah Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.